G-Day has come and gone for the Georgia Bulldogs, meaning the 2023 spring football practice season is over. That's Brent Rollins. I'm Dane Young. We're at UGAsports.com. We'll have some more UGA Sports contributors, writers, members, whoever pops in here, because a lot of people have access to this link. And we'll just chat and react. And please share your thoughts in the comments here. And we'd love to see what stuck out to you from Georgia on G-Day. I'll be honest with you, Brent, these shows, when I do this, it kind of turns to just say some dudes' names. Just start saying names of like people, and then it's going to be a show. And we can
Damon
do that
Wilson.
a lot.
I'll go first. Damon Wilson.
Oh, Aguero. Aguero. And I know he didn't even like do a whole ton, but they just showed him on camera, and I was like, my God.
He looks a little bit different for a freshman.
Yes, I don't think many people in Massachusetts are hanging out like that. Overall, if people care, there's final scores, but I really can't tell you who was on every team. Quarterbacks rotated around other than, I guess Beck was on the same unit the whole time. Vandegrift was everywhere. But then he didn't play a lot in the first half. Overall, let's start there with quarterbacks. And then we'll get to the big news of the day that Bear Alexander not only did not play at G-Day, he's not going to be on this team, which is he was going to be a starter for Georgia. That's a massive loss.
I mean,
all right, well, then let's start there. Bear Alexander.
Yeah, let's – in terms of him being a starter, I don't know that would have been the case. But he was a big rotational piece that you were expecting to contribute a lot and contribute disruptive type plays on the interior. But with him gone and then sort of watching what we saw today, I think that was kind of what I wrote down as my second biggest takeaway from the game, was that Georgia's pass rush over the past couple of years has been very interiorly dominated, both from linebacker blitzes as well as Carter on the interior and others, Devontae Wyatt. This season with Michael and these true freshman guys and others, that might kind of flip a little bit and be more – we might be more of an – we as in Georgia's defense might be more of an edge pressure team versus – and, still the traditional and the blitzes and how they scheme things. But just in terms of who wins their battles consistently, it might be more on the edge versus coming from the interior.
Rita Flies says that Bear Alexander ruined my day. I get it. A lot of potential with him. And you saw that he stepped in there late in the season for Georgia and was a contributor very much so late last year. I don't think you replace his production necessarily. I do think that Georgia has guys that will step in there. Mm-hmm. They're just inexperienced in a lot of ways. I mean, it's the two gamuts, I guess. You have the super experience with the Stackhouse and the Logues at the top end, maybe not quite as talented as a Bear. And then at the bottom end, you have like Jordan Hall, which is like you're new, but you're going to play.
Yeah, it hurts depth. If you have now any injuries on the interior, but I guess big sort of takeaways that with what you have now on the edge, I think that the loss of his loss kind of gets a little bit mitigated. But I think so. Gray Goose brings up an interesting point there. That might be true.
Let's move to what we saw on the field today. Let's go to QBs at first. Actually, no, because a few comments got in here. We got to talk about Mekhi Muse real fast because he is real fast, and that dude's a player. It's going to be tough to get playing time at receiver, but if you look for the G-Day legend, the Kyle Karimpoulos, as I tweeted out earlier in the week, Mekhi Muse was that, and maybe more, because he scored a touchdown on special teams, and they just decided not to count it.
Well, they also – one person ran by him and didn't try to tackle him. But no, he, hey, had a great day. Kid's working his tail off, that. And it's one of those where he's a good ways away from contributing in the game, maybe like offense type ways. But if he could be a potential return guy or at least backup return guy, hey, or even kick return, because traditionally the last couple of years we've seen running backs and Kyrus Jackson as kick returners. So, hey, if he can go get some there, go get some.
Quarterbacks, go.
One obviously had a much better day and was in much more of a rhythm than the other two. And I think it's one of those where, and I've seen this so much as a coach, where you got that first team offensive line, the first team just as a group, and you get into a good rhythm with that group. And obviously the defense wasn't really mentally, it didn't look like into it early. And I think Kirby probably inspired them a little bit, maybe during the sort of halftime break, because it got different in the second half. But it's just that part of it, you get to that rhythm early, and thus, it's easy to sort of keep in that, versus the other two have to come in, play against the different, play with the twos, and then against the better D. You don't necessarily get in that rhythm, and then you start pressing. But yeah, Carson Beck, he looked the part today.
I had a similar take that Beck looked like he was more in control than the others. The only thing that I'll say, I found Stockton to be pretty far behind each of the other two. And a lot of that's because from Vandegrift, I did see a couple flashes of the things you're like, oh, no one on this quarterback, competition can do some of the things that he can do. They'll scramble early on. I guess Gunner can do a version of that. But then even just some of the zip throws across the middle, he did well later. It's just not consistent. And when you look at Beck, what he did today was more consistent. Let's see if that's what happens throughout the year. I don't know that we learned anything today that's going to change where we are right now.
No.
I think to some extent, this is still Beck has the lead. This is going to be a long little journey of a quarterback battle. Vandegrift's right in this. And if both of them flail, Stockton would be in it too. I do think it would take a regression from each of the other two for Stockton to get there.
Yes, and I also think, like when we talk about sort of the look of it, and I think I saw you post something on the vent earlier today. We're both in that same boat of it's looking at the intangible factors and the ancillary things outside of throwing the ball. And for me, it's I just didn't want to see the ball being padded a lot. And you could tell that Vandegrift would, the extra pat, and then eyes went down. Okay, I'm gonna go to my legs because I know I can make a play there, versus consistently having eyes downfield, quickly make sort of coming off, and the other thing is just quickly making let's just let it rip decision. And I'm sure there's part of in the back of their minds, especially when you're not, like if you're feel like you're 2 or 3 in that realm, that you're not going to let it rip because you don't want to turn the ball over. Because that. So I think in general, there was a little bit of that. But, there's a clear guy at this point, based upon what we've seen and then also today.
Yeah, if there was a game tomorrow, Carson Beck is the starter. I think that's where we're at. There's a lot of time between now and a game being tomorrow, and we'll see how he manages that, because he had that same opportunity 2 years ago, didn't go well. What has he learned in that time to make sure that, like, when that time comes this time, that he does manage it well? He seems like he's doing all the right things right now, and he just was smooth today. Like, the offense just looked way more efficient when he was in there. Mm-hmm. He didn't have to think as much. I do think the defense played better in the second half. I don't know if they got chewed out.
So I think there was some of that. I think there was a lot of that, actually.
Because early on, it seemed like both offenses were just doing what they wanted
going
to
through
do.
The motions.
Moving beyond quarterback a little bit, we got to see some new guys in terms of skill. First, I want to say Arian Smith. I know that touchdown he got on the sweep. That's right up your lane, my friend.
Well, it's just any way to get guys who are fast and can do things with the ball in their hand. Now, the other one, I think they, in the second half, give him 1-2, and he kind of popped really good. And I'm like, no, we don't need that, especially with him. But I think from the ancillary skill components, I love seeing Arian on the field, finding ways to get him the ball. Rosie Jackson ain't doing what he does, but there was a lot of time. More as you got kind of further into the scrimmage, is you saw Lovett and Ladd on the field together, and that was one. And just from a scheme standpoint, Love it with what they did in sort of a double wing, whereas oftentimes in the past, that's two tight ends. That's Brock and Darnell. That's Brock and Delp. That was Delp and Lovett. And Lovett being that sort of attached off the ball tight end wing type look. And they tried to run a wheel route to him, and then it got checked down because they covered it well. They did some other, moving him around a little bit. And him with the ball in his hands, I think he is going to be a big-time difference maker this season.
Let's talk about Roderick Robertson a little bit. First time we get to see him in action. And I say this in part because he's a running back wearing number 0, which is going to be jarring to me for quite a while. It's not Darnell Washington big, but like this guy's pretty big. And he's a hoss in there. With the injuries that Georgia had, Branson Robinson, as UGA Sports reported this morning, looks like he's probably going to have surgery next week to make sure he's ready for the season. So they shut him down, did not play him. Dejan Edwards was back, but Georgia's still without Kendall Milton, still without Andrew Paul, his ACL injury. So there were 2 scholarship running backs, and then you saw Cash Jones get a lot of play, which obviously brings a lot of joy to my heart, and then Curtis Maximus as well. I thought Robinson, like he looked like he'd been at Georgia for 2 years already to me. Obviously, the pass reception stuff, he's got a lot to grow there. But in terms of just like running physical between the tackles, as much as a spring game will show you that, I thought he did good.
Yeah.
He's going to play for Georgia this year. Like, I'm to the point now that if you play as many games as Georgia does, you probably need 6 running backs.
I mean, he's going to be that guy that they enjoy giving the ball to in the fourth quarter of some of these games, especially early in the season.
What Branson had last year.
Yeah, and even Dejan Edwards when he was his first 2 years.
Yeah,
and he doesn't look like somebody who'd be that fun to tackle. I know that because he's a thick running back, very sure.
So that's one of the new weapons that we got to see. Saw a lot of Ernest Green at left tackle. Saw some Austin Blasky at left tackle. There's not much to glean from the offensive line in a scrimmage. It's just more these guys were out there.
Outside of the fact that I think one of the things you can tell, especially with that first group, and even if it's independent of Green versus Blasky, I thought they were both solid. Ernest Green, by the way, the very first rep of the game, he got sort of jarred back and knocked off by Terrell Waltower. Outside of that, very solid. With that first group with Truss, Van Pran, Ratledge, Mims, like whoever plays quarterback, with the combination of play action and scheme things that they do, isn't going to get touched for the first month of the season. And they're going to be protected very well this year if that group stays healthy and you don't really have any losses within that, at least those 4 guys, because that's just a lot of experience. And you could tell that group as a unit, no matter who was at left tackle, was really good.
One of the unsung heroes.
That was the number one thing for me, was that whoever plays QB is going to get protected.
Well, one of the unsung heroes of this team to me is Xavier Truss. One, because of versatility. If he had to split out and play tackle, he can. He's better at guard. But he's experienced. And that left guard spot, I mean, yeah, there's been multiple guys in there the last few years, whether it be Schaefer, you go back to Kenley, but that's been a spot that's been pretty steady for Georgia. Maybe not with like superstars, but you haven't seen it be an issue. And I thought Truss just got better and better last year. And he's got a lot of size there. So him being stable and Van Pran being on the other side of him, I think that helps either of the left tackles that get in there because they're going to be a little bit less experienced and they're going to be leaning on Truss to help them out.
Yep. And it's like health is big for that unit, and then health and then development. Who becomes the rotational guard? Is that Micah Morris? Like, does he get some time, start getting some time there? And then whichever of the tackles doesn't start, I think they're still going to play. I could see them rotating.
In terms of weapons for Georgia, you saw a lot of guys get play today. We talked about Muse already. I do think that once we get to fall, the pecking order remains the same. That target 1 is Brock Bowers because he's Brock Bowers, who is obviously more interested in catching footballs than talking into microphones. And that's not a shot at him. He is not interested in any of the shine that comes with being an amazing football player. He doesn't want any part of that, and he's going to get it anyway because he is that good.
Yeah.
So I hope people don't hear that and think that I'm making like fun. He's just not interested in them. It's not where his passion
He just
is.
rather ball.
Sure,
He just
and
rather
that's
go play
fine.
ball.
Nick Chubb was the same way. He didn't want to be doing the media interviews, and he was great at it. He's going to be target number 1. I still think McConkey is target number 2 for Georgia, and you saw that in this game. He is special, man. One of the best players in the country. I have no problem saying that.
Yep, I would agree.
And then after that, I think you get what do you flail off of that with the running backs or maybe some of the other tight ends. I mean, we saw Lawson Lucky. We've been talking about him all spring, and a big physical guy. I think the route running still needs a little bit of work, but you can see the catch radius.
Mm-hmm. Love it. I'm saying love it is in
love it.
Dominic love it. Like you saw on one of the third downs where it was him, I think, versus Tyke 1-on-1, where he just quick wins. And then they tried to hit him deep. Starks kind of physicaled him up a little bit on a smash route, which was basically the route that we showed in the film to lie on him that Missouri used him to the nth degree with. So he's the next one. And just looking at him with the ball in his hands. And then you got Arian Smith that can go run by anybody in the country. And Rosemary Jackson is just going to be physical, and he's going to be your Mohamed Sanu that's always there, that's there on third down, that catches the ball over the middle, does all the sort of dirty work in the blocking game. I feel very good about this group, skill position depth.
All right. Can you filibuster momentarily for me and answer this question? Because we just have final stats, so I'm going to have to do that screen share so we can share that with people and we can kind of go through those. Curtis Maximus with a great question. It says, I'm curious what you thought about Bobo and the offensive scheme. How about that flea flicker? If people didn't see, the play was snap to the quarterback. It was more of like a run off tackle to the right. And then
flipped to the receiver.
Flipped to the receiver, who then flipped it back to Carson Beck for the throw.
Who then checked it down.
Yeah. But I think that's fun. I think that's cool. I don't know that works in a game. It didn't really work in the scrimmage, but
in terms of scheme, looked the same. And it was going to. It wasn't there. I could tell the only sort of true difference for me was in sort of deployment of personnel. Was you saw a lot of double wing with Lovett as one of those wing backs. And, 2 receivers to the outside, 1 back, QB in the backfield in the gun, and then tight end on one side off the ball, and then a sort of another tight end sort of look. Traditionally for Georgia, that's a 2 tight end look for them. Today it was more receiver in that look. And the things that you can do off of that from a running game standpoint, I think open up a lot of interesting avenues for them offensively. But outside of that, their offense is their offense. And I think it's Georgia's offense at this point. And the rushing things are interesting, by the way, because oftentimes especially for the quarterbacks, it's like we're going to blow the whistle. And by the way, Vandegrift on both sides there.
Yeah. So here we are with the stat sheet here. With the passing, Carson Beck was, I'm having to do math in my head because technically he's on both sides too. 15 of 22 for
231.
See, this way
I'm good at that. I'm good at that. I can do that.
Yeah, 231 and the touchdown. So that's very efficient. He didn't really have anything that looked unsafe. I'll say that like some of the turnover stuff here, it's not really quarterback's fault from what I saw. That late one with Stockton, like that was put in a beautiful spot, bounced off the shoulder.
That's drop. Yeah. The one that Vandegrift, the interception that Vandegrift threw, he stared that down.
Yeah,
like he 100% stared that one down.
So Vandegrift 13 for 25 with the pick, 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. Again, solid. You saw a lot of hesitancy with him. And
yes.
You said the padding on the ball, not having full command.
From a look of it with him, I love the physical nature with which he throws, but it's also not very fluid.
Mm-hmm.
Like it looks very, and
looks like it takes effort.
Not so much effort, but that it's kind of like what you hear how Levis gets described right now in the draft process. That he's almost so thick that it just looks tight and stiff versus, quick snap of the arm and being very sort of fluid as a thrower. And I think sometimes that can manifest itself in accuracy issues because it's harder to replicate some of those things. But from it's there 1-2 down. But again, he's working against the better defense initially, and then you don't necessarily have the time to find that rhythm. You get the second half. Now the defense everybody's sort of driving up the intensity and whatnot. So, it's going to keep going on. Like I said, I think we have talked about this in maybe one of the shows. It wouldn't shock me if Georgia has a Michigan type situation to begin the season where one guy starts one game and then the next guy starts the next game. And then after that, it's like, okay, whomever.
I should give the disclaimer that stats in a scrimmage can be misleading. So I hope people don't. Stats in a real game can be misleading. So there's just a lot of different things at play here. So we're telling you what the stats are. I guess we all have to determine what that means individually. I don't think it means a whole lot. I think Georgia's still in a lot of the same spot that we thought it was in. Let's see, Gunnar Stockton, 13 of 22, 144 yards. I will say Carson Beck wasn't sacked. So Gunnar was 3 times, Brock was 2. So the least mobile among them, as we welcome in Blaine Gilmer. Join us. What's up, Blaine?
Hey, how's it going, fellas?
Among the 3 with 0
You talking about
here.
me? Because I was not very mobile.
You're probably more mobile than I am.
So Dane, there's a great question from looks like Greg Rosenberg earlier in the chat. Was Damon Wilson good, or do we just not have OTs be on the top 2 or 3? I think he's just good. Because you watched his get off, his bend. Like I put a clip on Twitter from the game, one of the sacks that he had, but it wasn't just that one play. Consistently, his explosiveness off the edge popped to me. And that guy, he got the recruiting ranking that he got. You can see why, because I think he's just legit good, and he's going to find himself on the field very quickly, especially in true pass rush situations.
Blaine, we haven't made it past offense yet, so we'll bring you in at a good spot. Get your quarterback take, skill guys take, and then I'll finish up some of the stat sheet stuff. Again, disclaimer with stats, it's a scrimmage.
Yeah, no doubt. And Kirby, he's getting to dictate when to stop it and what counts and what doesn't, all that kind of stuff. But Carson Beck, I thought just the ball placement was phenomenal in terms of, being able to put it in places where guys can continue to run and run after the catch. That's huge. The kind of the hidden yardage, if you will. Okay, yeah, he made the completion, but did he put a guy in where he can continue to make a play? He did that with Brock Bowers. He did that with Ladd McConkey early on. Even some of the completed passes we saw from Vandergriff, maybe in the 2-minute or something like that, Mekhi Muse, different guys like that were having to kind of contort their bodies a little bit and catch the ball. So I think that's what's really going to separate Beck right now from the other two. And Gunnar did some good stuff in terms of his arm strength and his speed. I think Gunnar's still got to get more consistent with his feet. At times he's really striding out there, trying to show off that Raven County cannon that he's got over there. But sometimes if he can keep his feet more consistent, obviously Gunnar Stockton's going to do good things. But to me, I don't know about you guys, but to me, Carson Beck looked like he was in control of this offense today.
Yeah, I think we agreed that if the game is tomorrow, Carson Beck has won the job, and it's from there. There's a long way until that first game, so I guess things could happen, but that's where we stand at the moment, and that's where we stood coming into G-Day. I will say one thing that I learned with announcers with Gunnar Stockton. I always look for these things that we're going to hear about this every freaking Georgia game for a long time, whether it's Jake Fromm's Little League or David Green and David Pollock being teammates back in Pee Wee. Stetson Bennett obviously had a ton of this. They just like that Tiger, Georgia is the name of a town.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's going to be a thing with Gunnar Stockton for a long time. I was like, he's from Tiger.
No, that's cool. That's cool. They got some cool unis up there at Raven County too. They could probably throw some neat pictures up there of Raven County up there. So it's going to be one of those things they latch on to probably.
Blaine, any other skill guys that caught your eye? Just we talked about Makai Muse a lot. We talked about Robinson getting it in there at running back, Lawson Lucky, and then we know what Georgia has with Bowers and McConkey.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just don't think you can forget about Oscar Delp. I know that he's not. Maybe the knock on him is okay. Maybe right now he's not. The blocking isn't exactly where you want it, but you got to give him credit for at times last year when he was asked to do so, he was sticking his nose in there trying to block and getting things going. But that's going to come over time. But man, there was a couple of plays early where he would just catch the ball and it's immediately, there's no wasted motion. He's catching and immediately getting north south. I just think that's a instinctual guy right there. And I think Oscar Delp is somebody that's maybe getting lost in the shuffle a little bit with all this Lawson Lucky hype, but he's still a tremendously talented player. And I thought other than the guys you mentioned, he's a guy that I saw a couple plays where I was like, wow, that's why he's one of the top tight ends in the country in his class. So.
And the blocking too. The blocking is going to be great. We didn't see a ton of that because it's a spring scrimmage, but still at least saw them be in position to do a lot of that. Let's finish up the stat sheet here and see if there's anything that catches our eye. Rushing, Robinson. I didn't know he was the second, so that's something I just learned right now. Was Roger Robertson the second? Maybe Blaine, since you cover recruiting, you would know that more than I would.
Well, I knew his dad had senior by his name, but I didn't know if he went by junior or the second or what. So.
Well, on this stat sheet, it's the second, so I'm going to trust what UGA Sports.com says there. Rushing 11 for 42 yards. Brock Vandegrift had a couple rushes. I do think that's the primary thing that gives him a chance in the quarterback thing with Vandegrift is, he did have a couple good runs, but if he doesn't throw better than he did, then he won't be involved in that. Cash Jones, my guy. A little some cash love there as a receiver too.
Savon Clark had a touchdown. He's a Dawson County boy up here, not too far from me. He played at Dawson, played at White County first, then finished at Dawson. But people forget Savon Clark is a guy who he had offers from a lot of Group of 5 schools and was really on his way. He was going to go to the Service Academy, play for Army at West Point, but ended up coming as a walk-on to Georgia when they come in. He's a guy that's been around for a while and knows the offense, reliable. So. That's Savon Clark.
The Haynes kid, freshman kid, that was a very good catch by him on the sideline, adjusting the ball. I think that was stalking it through that one to him.
What was the deal with Jackson Meeks's push to the end zone? Was that just we can't tackle you because it's G-Day?
I tend to think that was the feel of it. It's kind of like everybody doesn't want to go low just to make sure they get somebody down. And when you do that, you allow them to stay up.
Brent, you mentioned Yazid Haynes. He's a guy that we kind of heard buzz on when he started showing up and working with the team in early practices, bowl practices, all that kind of stuff. He's a guy that is a 4.3 40 laser timed guy, can absolutely fly. And they just said in and out of breaks. I've talked to some people, and Adonai Mitchell is the guy that he draws the comparison to. They just say he's so fluid in and out at the top of his breaks and makes people just kind of drops people's jock at the top of the route right there. So he's a guy that I think you saw, the instincts on that back shoulder by Gunners who kind of dropped that thing in there on the back shoulder and he broke it off against AJ Harris there. So Yazid Haynes is a guy who can fly and is obviously impressing early.
I will say the most shocking part of the entirety of that stat sheet is that Brock Bowers had 2 catches. I thought he should be put in the bubble until the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
He was going in motion on the first play, and I'm like, what are y'all doing?
But anyway.
The 2 things that I want to point out that I see in the stat sheet, one, I see Luke Bennett got on the field, which they put his name on the stat sheet, didn't get a target. But, hey, maybe in garbage time, Luke Bennett's out there catching passes for Georgia. Stetson's little brother, if people didn't recognize. The other thing is field goal kickers. A couple of those had some nice golf English on them to find their way inside the post.
The Badger one, especially. I think it was like out, in. Definitely had the leg for it. That's for sure. Kicked that thing well. And that's really, when you think about what is one of the biggest unknowns, that's one of the biggest unknowns. But I will say, so Dane, in terms of that's all the offensive things. We didn't necessarily look at the defensive stats, and I think we saw it today. The loss of Bear Alexander. All right, who's next? Christian Miller. Like, to me, he showed up in a big he showed up in a big way today, to where, okay, that guy now I see him as going to be a rotational piece, and he just takes those snaps that we're going to go to the other. But I thought he looked good.
Blaine, let's get your reaction to the Bear Alexander news.
Oh yeah, listen, he's a guy that there was a little bit of that happened in his recruitment, right? Okay, a little bit of hot and cold flipping back and forth, all that kind of stuff. There's a situation, with people around him, things of that nature. It's the way of the world. It's NIL, it's transfer portal, it's how it's going to happen. Georgia's got a lot of bodies in there in the middle, as JCP mentions here. I hope that stands for Jim Crockett Promotions, because you're now my favorite person if that does. That old school wrestling reference there. But Jordan Hall, tremendous. He looked great today. But I think Tyrone Ingram Dawkins is a guy who flashed a few times at the beginning of the season last year. I think he wasn't consistent enough in practice. Kirby kind of got on him and mentioned that a few times. But that young man from Gaffney, South Carolina, is somebody who at over 3 bills could get up and dunk flat-footed, coming out of high school. So he's a guy that is super athletic, super long, can play with some leverage there on the inside, and be kind of that tweener type guy. So I think Tyrone Ingram Dawkins is going to have a say in this room as well.
That's a great point, because maybe somebody, if you think, all right, because by the way, it wasn't just Wilson to me that stood out. And Pimba looked like
freaky,
a legit big-time athlete on the edge, movement skills. Gabe Harris, I thought he looked hesitant. He looked like he was thinking a lot as opposed to just going. But if those two, you feel good about those two, the 2 freshmen, even 3 freshmen on the edge, and Darius Smith, that maybe you move Ingram Dawkins more consistently on the interior to give that rotation another body. And then, because typically he's him and Michael kind of play the old Trayvon Walker role, at least on early downs. Maybe you move him a little more inside on early downs, and that's where he becomes, and he can sort of use his athleticism on the interior.
Oh yeah, he's a heavier dude. He can get up. He can play up over 300 pounds and still be athletic. So I think he could be that guy that kind of takes up something. But people forget, Dane, they still got Zion Lowe, they still got Warren Brinson. It's
Stackhouse.
The cupboard. Yeah, Stackhouse, and then of course Jordan Hall, as we mentioned. So then you add a guy that can kind of go up and down the line of scrimmage and TID there, who plays to me a little bit like a Malik Herring type deal, can go from a 5 technique all the way down to a shade nose if you need him to, depending on personnel and things like that. And I think that just adds a lot of versatility to Georgia's defense.
Another guy, Brent, I think I texted you this during G-Day, that just stood out to me physically, and I don't know how much shine he'll get on the field, but CJ Allen, you look at him and you see a guy physically, you're like, okay, you're going to be playing for Georgia at some point. You happen to be at a position right now that's pretty stacked at inside backer. Who knows? If some injuries happen, he might be needed. If nothing else, that's a guy on special teams this year that I'm like, okay, you can do all that. Yeah, you'll be just fine.
Yeah, him and Raylan Wilson are going to see a lot of time on special teams. Like, I bet both of those kids are on the punt team and go get some and go make tackles. Run, be fast, and go make tackles.
Raylan Wilson may end up finding himself on the field in the middle, like during the defense at some point, just because if it's him and Xavier Sorey right in there, like that's going to be a tight battle to see who gets those backup
third
reps.
guy.
Yeah, because man,
they play the third guy. That third guy always is going to get some time, and can you be that third guy?
Brent, you mentioned a guy that I just think is endlessly fascinating on Georgia's defense, and that's Darius Smith, because I don't see people that big that run that fast. He was out there like running with Brock Bowers. Didn't make a great play on it because it's Brock Bowers. I'm just saying that how many people in the country can do what he does with his length, his speed? I need to see how physical he plays. We haven't seen much of him, but I've heard a lot of buzz on him. I don't know if y'all have heard some of the same.
A little bit, and it's fun to watch him. I mean, he wears the number that's very much like Adam Anderson. He kind of has that body type and movement skills and all that. But just think about what we've mentioned, though. The names that we've mentioned in a front six, because they play six. Like it's rarely ever only in short yardage or goal line a true front seven. So 6 guys on the field at once, and all the freshmen that we just mentioned, all the returning interior linemen that we just mentioned. It's a lot of just depth and guys that are going to, hey, you're going to get run at some point. It might be 5 or 10 snaps a game, but they're there and they're going to be able to rotate like they do and play a lot of different guys.
Oh, you're muted, Dean.
Mute.
I was starting to screen share and I was still muted because, I'm a professional broadcaster. Defensive backs, I want to go there because there is an open corner spot with a pretty wide open competition here. Javon Bullard, as this photo from Catherine Skian for UGA Sports showed, had a nice pick. He tends to do that.
Yeah.
Every game at this point, it seems like Javon Bullard's finding the football. At corner, though, I was seeing AJ Harris all over the field in this G-Day game. I don't know how close he is in that competition toward the top of it, but I could see that being a guy that if maybe an injury happens, he's out there pretty quickly.
Yeah, him, Dalen Everett, both of them. I saw a lot of them out there, of course. But AJ. I mean, I haven't got to closely examine who did what. I just kind of would see him out there on the field. You see more of the receivers in this point that kind of stand out without going back and doing, as y'all do, reviews of film and things of that nature. But AJ Harris is a guy who is a blue chip prospect in every sense of the word. He's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the instincts. So it's going to be a true battle. I mean, I know that coming into it, Dalen Everett, Allen Green, AJ Harris, those are the kind of guys that are battling it out over there to see who gets that spot. So, but you're right. It seemed like everywhere. Now that could be a good thing or a bad thing. Are they targeting him, Dane? Because if they're targeting him, what does that say? So, or maybe Kirby's saying, "Hey, I want to see what AJ Harris has. Let's try to work something over that way, Bubbo. Dial it up over that way. You never know." But I don't know, Brent. What'd you think about Dalen Everett and AJ Harris? Those guys.
Well, I think, by the way, 100% that I bet that happens. Those conversations happen, or at least they happen before the day where it's like, hey, if we get a situation where you see a one-on-one call, let's go at X, Y, and Z and just see what we can do. But I think it's that world is just an interest. It's more to me interesting this year than any other year because you really have true like unknowns. And like as much like we thought Kamari Lassiter would be good, but with the way Tyke and then Bullard do, Dan Jackson's still kind of there, but gradually coming back. David Daniel, Sisavon, however you say it.
Sisavon.
Yeah. Like you've got guys that have played, but what ends up being your best 5 because they don't sub. Like they rarely sub those 5 players. Those are always in terms of snap leaders, year in, year out, those 5 guys. But does one corner, and based on watching it today, I don't see where one just looks infinitely better than another, like Everett versus a Julian Humphrey. And, muted again, Dane.
Yeah, Nyland Green was out there a lot.
Nyland Green played. Like, it's like, so do they rotate those guys or does it eventually just become one? I'm curious to see.
Brent, another thing too is, that's been one position that Kirby has not rotated a whole lot during his tenure there. He's had corners and he's ran with those corners. Mm-hmm. Is this year a situation, especially given the schedule early, where you say, okay, we got 4 games, and yes, I'm including South Carolina in that because South Carolina at home, Georgia's going to blow their doors off. When they come into town, he's going to say, okay, are we going to let's give these guys, all right, you get a couple series, you get a couple series, and let's roll with it these first 4 or 5 games here and see how things go. Because that could be interesting, or maybe he sticks to something where he says, hey, I got my guy, this is who I feel comfortable with. But it's just a thought because it was Ringo and Lassiter all year last year.
Every year.
Jaheim Singletary gone in the portal. Who knows about whether the portal's just open? Does a guy like if Nyland Green doesn't win the job, does he end up going somewhere now he's been there for a while? So that's just kind of been the case. Does it change this year a little bit?
Well, with the schedule being what it is, you wonder, do they try to play more players, get a big lead early to keep more players out of the portal in that way? And in some cases, I've heard Coach Smart say, if people want to leave, then we kind of want them to leave. We only want people that are invested in being here at the moment. And I don't know if that always manifests itself in that way. But
how many days is it? The window? I mean, it's not.
Well, they can't transfer within SEC right now. So if someone transfers out of Georgia and wants to play this season, they have to go somewhere else, which is why Bear Alexander, I mean, the two schools that I think immediately were popping up for him were USC and Texas.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's too late for SEC, so we'll see what he ends up doing. But I think that people, it's surprising that when it first went down. But I think once you know some of the details behind it with him and his situation, then I don't think it's tremendously shocking there, and especially what Georgia has that position. So we'll see how it goes forward. But yeah, I'm interested to see how the corner rotation goes and stuff along those lines.
Our Anthony Dasher is live tweeting Kirby Smart's news conference, so let's just pop that up here, see if there's anything worth reacting to. He said that this is might be the most cohesive team that he's had at Georgia. I really don't know what he means by the word cohesive there, and I guess we'll find that out as we go. It says he wants to watch film on quarterbacks. He didn't say much about Bear Alexander, just said that's the climate that we're in college football right now. Let's see. Kirby Smart asked if Carson Beck getting first reps with the ones meant anything. He just said that he's been with us all the most. So he didn't really ascribe much to that. And that's just saying he's not going to name a starter today. So I wouldn't read much into that either.
Nor will he until maybe like Thursday before the first game. Probably.
Maybe just waiting and see who runs out there. Very excited about depth on defensive line. I'm sure that's a nod to say don't worry about Bear Alexander not being there. Guys don't like tackling Roderick Robertson. I think we can understand why.
Yeah. Load.
So there's more.
The biggest win of the day, other than Clark getting a little dinged up when he got hit by Everett on that one screen that got, flare that got telegraphed. Outside of that, it didn't look like there was anybody that got dinged up at all. And that's winning. That is the ultimate victory in this sort of fashion, in this what it is that we're doing here. When
you look at the health check for Georgia right now, a lot of guys with some things that they're recovering from, maybe getting minor surgery. My dad always told me a minor surgery is something that happens for someone else. Having a surgery that they will recover from quickly and be ready for the fall. For the most part, I think everyone will be ready for the fall off the top of my head. There's going to be some people like Andrew Paul hasn't really practiced in a long time. Yeah. So his summer conditioning is going to be key. I think he'll play a little bit, but they'll probably ease him into things.
Very much so. But one guy, we talked about all the depth along the sort of that front six. We didn't mention Jalen Walker. Like he's one of those guys as well, and who played a lot even in the national championship game. Georgia's in a very good spot. There's a reason they're the betting favorite at the moment in time to repeat or three-peat, whatever you want to say.
I mean, to Blaine's point though, you look at the schedule and it's like, who can you even say keeps it close at least for a while on the schedule? Like you go for those first 6 weeks and you're like, I don't see it. Just talent wise, no one competes with that. Maybe that's getting cocky. But
Kentucky's going to be good. I really do believe they're going to be good. But other than that, we'll see.
Getting the Cohen guy back at OC was
and Devin Leary can flat throw it, man.
And they've got good receivers. They have some of the best receivers in the conference.
Really good receivers. Their question is, can they protect? They couldn't protect Will Levis. That's one reason Will Levis didn't look as good this year, is because their offensive line was like a sieve. Like it was just terrible. I have a couple of recruiting calls I gotta go get caught up with guys on, because I got them scheduled for about right now 7:00. So I got to go run and catch them with them. But I appreciate you guys.
Tell them we said hello. See you, Blake.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. See it.
Yeah, overall, like I think Georgia's season, and man, we have a long way to get to there, but it's going to come down to the matchup in Knoxville again. And Tennessee has a good enough roster. I haven't looked at Tennessee's schedule. I would think it would be tough for Tennessee to beat Alabama back-to-back years, so maybe they have a loss going into it. I'm just saying Georgia's schedule, I don't see a whole lot there to be worried about. But I also think Georgia's at a spot in terms of talent that there's only 4 or 5 teams in the country that you think even, have a more than 1 out of 10 shot of beating them every year.
As long as you don't give them the ball a lot.
Yeah.
I lost South Carolina in 2019.
Yeah. It would be Georgia making more mistakes.
That to me is actually the ultimate question of the season. Whoever plays quarterback, can they succeed when the pressure's on, when you're down like last year at Missouri, you're down 10 early in the fourth quarter, like that sort of realm. Like, does that happen? Because if not, then you won't be reaching the ultimate prize. If so, then you're going to be in that mix again with a chance.
Let's wrap with this question. And yes, I'll put this on the podcast feed as well. Someone asked about that. Andy Stowe asked if the season started today, who starts at left tackle? Brent.
I do think it's Ernest Green.
I tend to think so too. And I say that because if it's close and Blasky is your backup center, then you probably want to have his versatility as kind of that 6-man ready to get out there, a la Warren Erickson in previous seasons. But if it's not close, I think you go with Blasky. And at the moment, it seems like it's pretty darn close, neck and neck.
And also remember that Green is still really working his way back into shape. I think what was his back, right? Back injury. And, has obviously worked hard over the spring, but he's still got more time to even get in better shape. And just for me personally watching him, like he's a different level of athlete, and he just looks like a NFL type left tackle.
Yeah, I don't think Blasky's future is at left tackle. I think he's a really good center, and he would have been Georgia's starting center if Van Pran would have gone pro.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they're probably even looking ahead to next year and say we had to have a really good option with him there to kind of bridge you to Bobo or whoever the next center would be after that. Because we saw Jared Wilson be there today, but George has just had so much stability at center. I think they're always kind of looking at what's next. I mean, what if Van Pran, who's been remarkably healthy, if he gets hurt, you're going to need Blasky. I think I'll put it this way. I agree with you that at the moment, I think Ernest Green would start at left tackle. I think both of them play this season, and it would be in part because of Blasky's versatility. You're going to need a lot of guys on this offensive line. I think Blasky and Truss playing multiple positions gives Georgia an advantage a lot of teams don't have.
Yep. I think it's going to be an area of strength. As long as they stay healthy, it's going to be a big-time area of strength.
All right, let's wrap up. Is there a particular player that you just like, I got very excited about that after seeing them today?
Oh, it's Wilson and Pimba. Those two. Those two, to me, just athletically and watching them and just the go and the bend and the things that you got to do at that position, that stood out.
It was Aguero to me because I looked at it and said, I don't know if he can even play football, but just seeing that person, the way he's shaped as a freshman, I think he's a first-round pick right now.
You know who he reminded me of from the look of him? I walk in as a true freshman and I look like a football player. The Matthews kid that ended up transferring. What was his first name? Trey, maybe? Trey Matthews.
Trey, that went to Auburn?
Went to Auburn, yeah. From the day he was a freshman, he looked like a SEC football player. And Aguero is the same.
I mean, I was just like, my goodness, man. Like the off-the-bus challenge with Aguero, yeah. You can see why he was recruited the way that he was. I'm excited to see where he goes from there. If you want to see Kirby Smart's news conference, that'll be posted here on this YouTube channel pretty shortly. You can hear the coach's comments after Georgia's spring game. As we move forward on this YouTube channel, spring camp is over. So it'll be some storylines into fall, obviously transfer portal being one of them. We do anticipate more Georgia players will enter that transfer portal. There's also a chance that Georgia plucks someone out of it. They have roster spots that they have to shed at this point to make way for a couple of incoming freshmen. But if someone unexpected left, obviously they're going to go and replace them. So we'll see how that works out. Otherwise, me and Brent are going to turn our focus to NFL draft here. And we started that with Film Don't Lie this past Thursday with some of our mid to late round picks, including Stetson Bennett, who I was glad to see him at the stadium showing off that big fancy ring that he got. all the players from last year got their championship rings today. Up close version of that over on Roddy's Twitter feed if people want to see it.
Yep. I saw those pics. Those are good.
I don't know what that shirt was, but that's fine. I'm not a fashion person. Anywho, thanks for watching, everybody. We really do appreciate it. If you are not subscribed to this YouTube channel, please do so, because we're the most popular one that cover Georgia on the interwebs, and we're really excited about our growth on YouTube. And me and Brent just like text about this stuff anyway off air, so we're really excited that y'all care about what we think and want to hear what we have to say on air. Brent, thanks for joining me. Have a good night, and we'll see everyone later on.